second. If we can have somebody just kind of like keep track of the chat, please.
Will do.
Awesome. So you can go ahead and start recording, and whenever you give me this sign, I can just go ahead and go with the opening remarks, Kyle.
Okay. You are good to go.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Ideal Conversations. And for those of you that join us for the first time, IDEAL stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Advancement, and Leadership. This Ideal Conversations is a Student Diversity Council effort to promote discussion among students. My name is Diana Acevedo. I'm a fifth-year PhD student in the Department of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine, and I am the co-president of the Student Diversity Council. And to kick off the Latinx and Hispanic Heritage Month, we will have today a student panel from KUMC and UMKC, and we're going to talk about what is it like to be a Hispanic student in the medical field. So with that in mind, we're going to start by talking about what is LMSA.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Kyle Rampitzrider. Currently, I'm a second-year medical student studying here at KU. And so I've been a part of LMSA for this past year now. And so what is LMSA? Well, we're a national organization, and we actually are involved with several different medical schools across the country. And really what our focus is to promote service, mentorship, and advocacy for students in the medical field, as well as members of the Latino population. And we advocate for the advancement of health in those populations. Okay.
So much, Kyle. With that in mind, we have a student panel from, as I mentioned, both schools, UMKC and KUMC. So they're going to introduce themselves, and they're going to tell us why they joined LMSA. So we're going to start with UMKC.
All right, well, hi everyone. My name is Saida, and I'm a first year in medical school. And why I joined UMKC? Well, we actually, Deb and I didn't join. We sort of started the organization because there was actually, we were the first class who had enough Hispanic students to form the organization. So we were sort of asked if we wanted to finally form the organization, and we did. What else? My Hispanic or Latino roots, so I'm Mexican.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. We also have Deborah Rivera from UMKC. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and also talk to us about why you joined LMSA.
Hello everyone, my name is Deborah. I am a second year at UMKC. My Hispanic heritage, I'm half Puerto Rican and I'm half Salvadorian. And like Saida was saying, we didn't join LMSA, we started it at UMKC. That's something we're really proud of because our class was the first that had that many Hispanic students, and it wasn't really many. So it's just crazy to see how much we've progressed in the past couple of years. If it already would have been an organization at UMKC, of course, I'm really connected to my Hispanic heritage and roots. And so the main reason for joining it or starting it would have been for me to be connected while at the medical school. Yeah.
And to go off a little bit on what Deb said, so we had about 5 Hispanic students in our class at one time. And that's 5 out of what, like 100, Deb, or something like that?
Yeah, over 100, like about 110 or 120 at any given point is how big our class is. And so just thinking about like 5 is the most that the school has ever had in their decades of being an institution. It's really crazy, but I'm also proud of our class and how we've been able to like pave the way for students coming after us.
Thank you so much, guys. And now we're gonna go with our students from KUMC. So we have Michaela.
Hi, y'all. I'm Michaela. I'm at KU Med. I am a second-year medical student, and I joined LMSA not only like for the community aspect, but also for opportunities to give back to the greater Kansas City area and the Hispanic and Latino population around us. And I am a mix of Spanish, Mexican, and Portuguese.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michaela. We also have Olivette.
Hey guys, my name is Olivette Martinez. I'm a second-year medical student at KU Med. My Hispanic roots are Mexican, and I joined LMSA to be a voice for the very few of us Hispanic people at KU Med, and to advocate for the Hispanic healthcare needs within the underserved population here in KC.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Michael Suniga.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael. Grew up in Dodge City. My family's from Mexico. I joined the MSA. Thankfully, I was reached out to from the Kansas City campus, and I thought it was a great idea to be able to get involved and stay connected with the Hispanic community. I'm in the satellite campus in Salina, and so the Hispanic population here isn't very big, and so it's nice to be able to connect with other Latinos and be able to do some work to help others out.
Thank you, Michael. And with that, that was our student panel introduction. And now we're gonna go ahead and open for a discussion of our panelists. And the first thing that we're gonna talk about are different aspects of what is it like to be a Latinx or Hispanic student in the medical field. So first, we're gonna touch on imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is known as a psychological pattern in which an individual doubts their accomplishments or talents and has persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And this is actually more marked in minority students, first-generation students. And like Sarah said, sometimes we have to pave the way, so these feelings might be amplified. So with that in mind, we're gonna have some students talk about imposter syndrome. So we're gonna start with our UMKC student, Saida.
Thank you, Diana. So for me, I feel like it stems from not having enough peers that look like me, or not even peers, but also staff members and professors who don't look like me. And so I guess it just feels like everything at school sort of unconsciously tells me that I'm not supposed to be there. I don't see other people like me, and I don't see other people who I guess would dress like me or talk like me. Like Spanish, I grew up speaking Spanish my whole life, and so I guess it's just I'm very culture shocked. So it's very different, and also I guess it is just stems from our background, because Hispanics are just, I guess, stereotypically seen as people who are at low-paying jobs like factory workers or at like restaurants or things like that. So for me to be in medical school, I feel like I'm just not supposed to be here sometimes.
Thank you, Sarah. And then we have Olivette, and I have a question for any of you, but Sarah, Olivette, or Michael, do you guys ever feel like the reason that you're in medical school is because you're a Latino, or has anybody mentioned that?
Mhm,
Yeah,
absolutely.
actually. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so I remember during the first couple of months of medical school, I had convinced myself that I was just accepted just to be another statistic for KU Med's minority population number, because I really didn't think that I deserved to be where I'm at today. So yeah, I really had convinced myself that I was just another statistic.
Yeah, and going off on that a little bit, sometimes I wonder, like, I just want to ask the people who interviewed me or who just looked at my paperwork or my application. I just sort of want to ask them why they chose me, because I mean, maybe I did have a good application or maybe I didn't, but sometimes I do think that the fact that I'm here is because I am Latino, and it was just to, you know, check off a little box or something on their requirements for the school.
Thank you. And then we have Michael. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, not just from part from being a Latino and going to medical school, but just going to medical school in general is very difficult. And you go from being one of the top students in your class to maybe just being average, and that can be difficult and take some adjusting to, and especially being able to adapt and grow. Not being afraid of your surroundings, because I know that depending on what kind of schools or cities we're from, we've all been put in uncomfortable situations, and we can always learn to adapt and grow from that. So it's been difficult, but also it's a very big growing experience.
Thank you so much. Another aspect of being a minority student, especially from Hispanic origin, is that we have to overcome adversity in medical school in different flavors. So I have Sarah and Olivet that will share some of their experience with us.
So I'd like to share more of the adversity getting into medical school. I feel like the biggest challenge for me has been the lack of access to resources or knowledge to resources, especially when applying to medical school. I'm a first generation student, the first one to go to medical school, first one to go to college. My parents didn't know anything or had zero connections to doctors, so I couldn't ask them anything about medical school. So I was really blind as to what the medical path entailed. Just speaking off of a specific experience, I remember finding out about the MCAT registration opening date the day that it opened. And I hadn't realized that it opened so soon. So immediately once that happened, I went to my pre-med advisor at my undergrad institution to ask him so many questions about the MCAT, because I honestly didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I was really blind to it. And unfortunately, my pre-med advisor made me feel incompetent in a way for not knowing about the MCAT. I remember leaving my pre-med advisor's office in tears because I just felt like I wasn't good enough for medical school, but eventually I brushed that off because, you know, we don't listen to the haters. And I remember just asking my peers what they were doing for the MCAT. And a lot of them said that they were going to be taking courses online. And I remember looking into these courses, and my gosh, they were so expensive, up to $3,000 for an MCAT course. That is so expensive. I just didn't know how a college student could pay for a course like this. I didn't have the money to pay for a course like that. My parents didn't have the money to pay for a course like that. I ended up just buying Kaplan books and like some question banks online, and just studying off of those and off of Khan Academy videos on YouTube, which are free. And I did just fine. I mean, I got into medical school my first time, but I feel like the lack of knowledge to resources and like not being able to ask somebody, not knowing who to ask. The only person I knew to ask was my pre-med advisor, and she made me feel completely incompetent. So I feel like that was a huge obstacle course for me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, so I feel like the resources thing is definitely something that has impacted me as well. I mean, now during my first year, I'm sort of starting to study for boards a little bit, just sort of get my feet wet. And so I've been looking at all the resources, and I mean, some of these are just insane. Just a few months of like a subscription to UWorld or something is super expensive. And just not being able to have that ability to just get it and learn from that, where other people, they can just not think twice and just use that resource. But also the support aspect of it, just not being able to know what to expect for medical school. I just sort of, sometimes I just feel like I just ended up here in medical school and I'm not really sure what it's all about, and I'm just learning as I go through it. But other people have like parents who have gone through the program, or older siblings or things like that, and so they know what to expect a little bit. And even other resources like Anki or just free resources like that I didn't even know about until my third year in medical school. So I feel like that's definitely a challenge for us.
Thank you so much for sharing. Another aspect of adversity besides imposter syndrome, lack of resources, is that once you get into medical school, then how to address instances when training superiors say something racially charged or inappropriate. So we're gonna hear from Olivet and Deborah.
You can go first.
Okay. So specifically for me, I haven't had an instance yet where I had a superior say something racially charged or inappropriate. Just for context, at UMKC, like our medical program, we have the traditional route, and which is the 4 years after undergrad. Me and Saida are in the 6-year medical program out of high school. So I would say it feels a little different just because we have that age aspect of where other medical students might be a lot older than we are going through this. Not only do we have the age aspect of feeling like we can't speak up to our superiors, we also have the aspect of being scared of speaking up to them because of our racial background. So a lot of times people might say something as a joke and you might not know, oh, like, would I be able to report this? Like, should I even speak up about this? But I would say that ethically you should. If we are held to that professional and that high standard as medical students, we should also hold our superiors to that same standard, the attendings, faculty, and stuff like that. So at UMKC, we do have a system where we can file anonymous mistreatment reports. So that's on a website where we could fill out a report and then they would investigate that. So that's for somebody that might not be willing to speak up necessarily like in person, which I think is a really good option. But I think that we could also pull them aside and let them know if we are comfortable doing that.
Deb, I remember we also talked about not just our superiors making racial comments or things like that, but also our peers.
Yeah, so that gets pretty different situation because for our peers, we are the same age and we are on that same level. And so it might be hard sometimes to kind of call them out per se, or like pull them aside and let them know that that's inappropriate. But yeah, that's something that I'm still working on, trying to figure out how to address those situations, because we are medical students and we should be professional. And I don't think that racially charged or inappropriate comments should be like, oh yeah, we're just gonna let them say that. It doesn't bother me in the long run, because overall these people will become doctors in the future, and these people will be taking care of the Latinx population or other populations. And so I think it's important to let them know that these comments are inappropriate, even if they are peers, or even if they are our training superiors or attendings or stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I've unfortunately have had experiences where, both as an undergrad shadowing doctors and as a medical student at clinics, where I've had both patients and doctors say some really inappropriate and racially charged comments, which is very unfortunate. But I feel like, and also from peers in medical school, but I do feel as medical students, we need to be able to recognize these comments and learn how to address them when it occurs to a superior or to a boss. I don't think these comments should be ignored, because it gives implicit approval that this kind of behavior is okay. And over time, comments like these by doctors or by patients are cumulative and to us, and it exacerbates the inequities in health that we see in our patient population. I'm still trying to figure out how I can address comments made by superiors in the moment, because I do know that KU Med has an anonymous reporting system online, but I think I don't know, I feel like we need some kind of seminar that teaches us how to call out our superiors or preceptors or the doctors that we're shadowing when they say comments like these. Because yeah, well, in the end, this is just another obstacle that us as minorities or underrepresented students have to face in medicine, unfortunately.
And so Diana, could I say something? Just
Absolutely.
okay. So this didn't happen to me, but it did happen to one of my peers. So he is Latino as well, and so he said something about how he was just outside with some other students, and some people were cutting the grass, like I'm guessing some workers, and so they made a comment about how he should help them cut the grass or something like that. And he said that at first he didn't really register what they were trying to say. But afterwards he did think about it, and he said, well, that was pretty offensive. But I guess to me, like whenever things like this happen, it's sort of shocking at first, because it's like you can't really believe that it actually happened and they actually said that. So it's sort of like we aren't really sure what to say. But I feel like the best thing would be to sort of ask them a few questions, like, hey, what did you mean by that, or why do you feel like that, just to sort of help them think about why they're actually saying what they're saying.
And sorry, I'm gonna add on to this. I feel like it's so much more different to call a fellow peer out for saying a racially aggressive comment versus calling out a superior whose future is in your hands, who's evaluating you, who's possibly writing a letter of recommendation for you in the future. It's just, I feel like in that situation, it's just harder to call a person out for saying something like that, or ask them why they said something like that, or even tell them that their comment made you uncomfortable. Yeah, and like I've experienced it with a preceptor of mine. I wasn't able to call him out because he was evaluating me, so couldn't really do that. So yeah, I really do think our medical schools need to have some kind of seminar or simulations that teach us how to address comments like these made in the clinic.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing. I am seeing some of the comments on the chat and they are talking about simulations, maybe assertiveness workshops or diplomacy skills, I think that should be part of the curriculum, and I think that is very important. So with that, we're going to move to our next section, in which we're going to talk about experiences and challenges, including discrimination, and how has it been for you to be in medical school as a first-generation college student?
So Deb and I were talking about this a little bit, and we touched on it earlier, but just the environment with our peers is pretty, what do I say, not toxic, but I guess just unhealthy. It's sort of like silent discrimination, so they don't really say as much to us personally, but it's more of the little things that like they ignore us, or they sort of look down on us, or, you know, I try to say hi to people, but they're just like, oh, hey, like as if we weren't. It sort of seems like they feel like they're more important than us just because of our background. And I do have sort of an experience that happened last year. So I was trying out for a dance team, and this dance team was like a Middle Eastern type of dance. So it was one that I've never done before, and I sort of took it as a social experiment to sort of see how people would interact. And so I was just there, and there was a group of people, I guess, and there was one main guy who was, I guess he was the leader. He was just about people, how they danced and things like that. And so he sort of got super close to me, I guess it felt like he was trying to intimidate me, and I didn't move or anything. And so afterwards he just said, back off, or like move away or something like that, or to sort of, I guess, include himself or something like that. But I sort of wanted to see how they would treat me in general, because they're sort of in their own group and they don't really include anybody else. And so I tried to see if somebody else took interest in what they do or their culture or things like that. I mean, sometimes I go before the pandemic, they would have events where they would have food and things like that, and I would go, and because I just like learning about different cultures. But I was the only Hispanic there amongst just different people, and I wasn't really talked to, just maybe like a hi or something like that, but basically just ignored. So that's the type of discrimination that I see a lot at UMKC. Deb, I don't know if you've have anything else to say.
I would have to agree with Saida. It's the silent discrimination. It's unheard, but you can feel it. Like you feel uncomfortable in the room, whether that's being like you feel like looked down upon by your peers, like, oh, that she's definitely not supposed to be there, or I don't know why she's even here, or they just ignore us, or they wouldn't even talk to us, like that being looked down upon, or even like microaggressions that Saida talks about. Although it's not blatant racism, you still feel uncomfortable and you still feel like you can't even be yourself. And for Saida, that sadly, like she went to try and join like organizations from different cultures, and even then, she wasn't even treated like right or included. So although we haven't experienced it to that extent, I still feel like that silent discrimination still hurts. And it's still a challenge to feel comfortable within the medical school and still feel like you belong, like going back to imposter syndrome. that feeling like you don't belong comes from that silent discrimination that you faced.
Thank you so much. And I just have a quick question. How do you think, in terms of discrimination, how do you think your experience is different than other minorities in medical school?
For me personally, I think the difference is like we are at UMKC, for example, Latinx students are the minority of the minorities. So meaning even other minorities are in greater populations than we are. So if there's 10 Black students, there's always going to be less Latinx students. There's like 2. So it's like even within other minorities, we're like, there's not even much of us to begin with. And so, yes, it's easy to connect with other minority groups. For example, LMSA and SNMA get along really well, and that's where we find our group, and that's where we can feel comfortable. But at the same time, Latinx students still face different discriminations than SNMA students would, and so I feel like that's where it comes to play, is that we are even more of a minority than other minorities, and so it's hard to find faculty that look like us. It's hard to find other peers that look like us and that we can speak to, and so it makes it hard to deal with this discrimination because it feels like we're the only ones going through it, instead of being able to relate to others. I don't know if Saida feels like the same way.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you said the minorities of the minority, because I've definitely felt like that too. But I would like to add that the way our experiences are different is that I feel like our parents are a little more dependent on us. And what I mean by that is like sometimes they say maybe they don't speak English or they need help with certain things. They sort of rely on us. And sometimes I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on me, you know, because I'm just worried about, you know, what my family's doing over here and what they need. So I sometimes I just can't focus in class because I'm just thinking about all that stuff. So I'm not sure if this is something that other students like an SNMA have to face, but it definitely gets in the way for sure.
I'd like to add to that in terms of a lot of Latinx students, I would say, are like a lot family oriented, as Saida was saying, and so like other students might not think about that as well. Like for me too, like Saida, I think a lot about my family and the pressure of being a first-gen medical student and how much pressure that is. I think about that every time I take a test or anytime I have to do anything big like that. It's like a heavy weight to have of trying to succeed and trying to do better than the circumstances that you were in the first place, and trying to do better. And so that's what I think about too.
I can completely relate to what Deborah said. I feel like the cloud of failure like weighing down on our shoulders is so much. And personally for me, like my parents immigrated to this country just so I could have success in this country, and that's a lot of pressure. They left everything they had in another country to come here to a new country, and that's, I don't know, I feel like that is always in the back of our mind somehow, especially when we take our exams and like with boards coming up, etc. But yeah.
And one of the difficult things about medical school is that it's ongoing. We're always learning. We're always growing. So it's never it's not a cycle that we can break where we can actually take time and think about our families and comfortably without feeling like we have to be doing something or studying or growing more. My parents also went to Dodge and worked in the beef vacuum plants, and so a lot of Hispanics in Dodge City just end up working in the same cycles as their parents and going back to work in the same plants that they were working in their entire lives. And so how do we break those cycles, and how do we create change and without feeling guilty or without feeling like we're leaving our family behind.
Thank you, Michael. And with that, I want to ask about how is it like to be a first generation college student? You guys are talking about the pressure and family, but tell me more about being not only a first generation college student, but also being the first one in your family to be on the path to become a doctor.
Yeah, I feel like most things are challenges for first generation medical students. You don't have anyone to show you the way or lead you through the steps that they took whenever they were in college or whenever they went to medical school. I was very fortunate to have OIC, the office in Kansas City for KU. They have very great programs like the PAP program, pre-admissions program. They also had the pre-matric program, and I took full advantage of those too. And that has been a blessing when there's so many things and obstacles standing against us to be able to advance or prepare for medical
school. For me, I sort of feel like I have to do everything on my own. I'm the youngest in my family, and I have two older brothers. But they went to college for a little bit, but then they didn't. And so I feel like I can't ask them about anything because they're not going through this experience, or they don't know what it's like. Or my parents, they didn't go through something like this either. So I just feel like I have to do it on my own sometimes. Just figure everything out as I'm going through it.
Is there anybody else that would like to share their experience as first generation college student?
I'd like to share. I think our experience as coming from high school to medical school was a huge transition. And so at UMKC specifically in our program, we don't have to take the MCAT. But for example, it's hard knowing even what all these things mean in general, like what even was the MCAT, what score would I have needed? As a first generation medical student, I don't even know what I don't know. It's hard to explain stuff like, oh, what is step one? People talk about that all the time. Oh, I realized I had to take the second year, but everybody already knew that. People had peers they could speak to get resources. For me, I agree with Saida completely. I feel like I have no one to talk to in that aspect of I can't speak to my parents and ask them, oh yeah, how was medical school in your day or something? Or for example, I have two older brothers as well, and they didn't even go to college. So I can't even speak to them about stuff like that. Another aspect that makes it really challenging is that we have to kind of do undergrad and medical school at the same time. So as far as resources for both of them, like I said, I don't know what I don't know. And so even if I did found a resource, like Saida said, it would be too late. It would be too late. You could find the question bank or Anki or something like that, and it would have already been too late. We wouldn't have been able to use it. Or if we are exposed to a resource, it's way too expensive. A huge aspect for me as a second year medical student is that I'm going to be taking boards soon. And so there is that money factor that comes into play, but it's also the resources of not knowing what I should even use. And so as a first generation student, we kind of have to figure that all on our own. So that's what I would say is the huge struggle, the academic resources and not being able to speak to anybody within our family or even sometimes peers to get information.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I remember coming into medical school not knowing anything, and like everybody around me already knew what step one was. I didn't even know we took that after second year, honestly, coming into medical school. Everybody was talking about like pathoma and boards of beyond and sketchy. I literally did not know what any of those were. And I, um, I wish, to answer somebody's question on the chat that I saw earlier, I do wish that like KU Med um, had like some kind of, well, pre-COVID or post-COVID, had some kind of like get together for first generation medical students or like minority medical students. Just because I didn't do the pre-matriculation program or any of the summer programs that KU Med offered. And that I felt like that put me at more of a disadvantage because I knew even less people than my fellow minority students. And I kind of felt left out just because I didn't do those programs that KU Med offers. So yeah, and having less connections. But I do feel like a meeting, like a gathering at the beginning of the medical school year would be really helpful. Yeah.
I will say that there is a program at UMKC called STAR, and that's basically a mentorship program that helps minority students. And so I feel like they've been, but even that that barely started. Just when was it, Deb? Like 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was 2 years ago. So our first year here, we didn't even have LMSA. We didn't have a mentor program. So although changes are being made and it's really good, like even then that transition into our years in medical school, we still didn't have the resources or mentor programs. But like Saida was saying, the STAR program at UMKC includes the medical school, and they also have different mentoring programs for underrepresented minorities within the nursing school, the pharmacy school, and the dental school. So there are being strides made to help support URM students. But like I mentioned, our first year here, we didn't even have a lot of those things. And so it's still a challenge and it was difficult.
Mm-hmm. And even though they are making good changes and they are in the right direction, I feel like it's sort of, I mean, they should have been done a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure.
So to keep on going with this discussion, which has been very interesting, and thank you so much for your participation. I want to know, like, what type of things you guys wish you knew in your first year, and what type of advice would you give to young minority students that are interested in the medical field but might not have the resources or connections?
So for me, I wish I would have known how to reach out to people. And I feel like that sort of goes back to our culture again. We were sort of taught not to ask for anything. Like, for example, if we were visiting at a family friend's house or something that we were all Hispanic, we were told not to ask for food, not to ask for things. And we're also taught not to complain about things. So I feel like that, just growing up with that sort of teaches us not to reach out and ask for help. So that's something I wish I would have known for sure.
The advice that I would have is to keep going no matter what or how impossible you think it is. I kind of want to be that example for other minority students that it is possible, because for me, I didn't have those resources. I didn't have the academic resources like that, or even the money for that matter to even get where I am today. But like Saida said, it is important to reach out. That's like the biggest thing. It sucks that even as URM students, we kind of have to do most of the work on our end, finding pipeline programs or places where we could get like free resources. But I think for LMSA and all the strides that they're doing and all the pipeline programs and mentoring programs that are starting, I think it's important that we kind of help the students, guide them in the right path, because especially for high school students that are going into undergrad, they're not going to know a lot of the stuff for MCAT resources or stuff like that. So I think it's our job to kind of like close that gap and help provide resources for the students. But on their end, I would say to do a lot of research as much as you can.
And to start wrapping up our discussion, I want to touch on different opportunities that we can identify or even create to support Hispanic or Latinx students. For instance, what can we do as a community to show support and establish collaboration between UMKC and KUMC? I think it is very important, and I've heard this over and over, that it will be a good idea to establish a mentoring program, especially for first generation students, that not only you guys mentor maybe high school students that are interested into going into medical school, but also that you guys probably get mentored by third or fourth year students. Also a collaboration program that can potentially share or recycle some materials for that preparation. We talked about a simulation workshop, maybe assertiveness and diplomacy skills that are needed. And with that, I'm going to leave Kyle to talk more about what else can we do to support and establish collaboration.
Thank you, Diana. Well, I think you kind of captured all the points that I was wanting to bring about, but I would like to echo, I think mentorship is a big component in trying to address some of these things. I know moving forward in the era of COVID, I think being able to work on this online platform, we might be able to easily get together with UMKC and other chapters around the nation to kind of just have these workshops and opportunities to have these conversations on like what you can expect trying to get into medical school. What are some ways you can navigate the system? What are some more affordable ways to study for the MCAT? And so I think it's be able to have that contact for people in medical school that they can speak about their experiences. And I think that dialogue will help the undergraduate students significantly as they're trying to navigate their own current situation. But that's one example. I think a lot of things that you touched on are things that we should absolutely strive towards.
Thank you, Kyle. Another reason why we decided to partner with UMKC is because usually these two medical schools are seen as rivals, but we have to actually come together and bring support, especially to minority students, which we have heard over and over that are very few in both schools. We also wanted to make sure that this conversation gets started. And I want to know if you guys have any other ideas of how we can get involved or even show support to you guys.
I mean, I can kind of just speak on that a little bit. Just based on how things went today, I think having another follow-up ideal conversation, I think there might be more to add to this conversation. And including more students from undergraduate campuses around the Kansas City metro area or around the region, you could even say, and potentially even high school students as it relates to talking about opportunities to pursue the 6-year program as well. So we have a pretty wide gamut in terms of the population of students that we're trying to address. And so I think working with SDC, I think we could potentially have another one of these gatherings over Zoom.
Absolutely. Another thing that I wanted to bring up that I really think it's great and ideal from UMKC is the fact that they have this program that is called Avanzando. It's a mentoring program that is actually for like all different majors. But I think that at KUMC, there's like a lot of need for a program like that, especially for minorities and first generation college students. And I wonder if maybe Sarah can talk a little bit about that, how that program has helped her and how long she's been in that program.
Yeah, so I think I started this program my second year, so it was after extending. And what extending means is in the program, if you don't pass a class or if your GPA gets below a certain level, then you have to redo the year again. And so I just started this program after that, and that's actually how I met Diana. And so she was my mentor for a while, and I feel like that helped a lot, just being able to get to know her a little bit more and sort of understand what things she has gone through as well. And so that sort of gave me it just inspired me, because she has gone through so much. And I'm sure, Diana, there's a lot that I don't even know that you've gone through, but just seeing you push through and keep going, it's just sort of made me want to do the same.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I am very proud of you on a personal note, and just the fact that you're still going strong it's a great motivation for me as well. And I just wanted to say that as a minority student, I know that there is such a heaviness in your shoulders of being first. It is hard to pave the way for your family, your future generations, but at the same time, there is always this reward. And you know, like, yeah, even though there have been times that I absolutely want to quit, I always think that this journey, it's not about myself, but it's about future generations. Just imagine the life change that you will bring about, not only for the students that see you and be like, oh, she can make it, I want to be like her, I want to be like him, but also about like, I believe it was Michael that was saying that, you know, like we're called to kind of like break those cycles of our families. So most of all, you know, I just want to encourage you guys to keep going, to find support, to find peers. And I know sometimes that is hard to find, but the idea is to potentially create, like, I wouldn't say an organization, but maybe a support group. Because sometimes I feel that as a minority students, we need kind of like two types of support. Sometimes just personal support to talk about struggles, and sometimes that type of academic support to kind of like help us get that like to the other side. So with that, if you guys have any questions or any final thoughts, just please share.
I would like to say something. I feel like at times I just didn't even think about what med school was. And what I mean by that is that it can be so overwhelming sometimes. I mean, the money, all the classes, the tests, just everything. And I feel like part of me is, I guess, glad that I didn't know too much about it, because if I had known, then I probably would have just felt like I wasn't able to do it. And so I guess my advice would be to sometimes just just don't think about it, and just, if you're really passionate about what you're wanting to do, just go for it. And I'm a person of faith, and so I feel like I'm here because of God, and I'm here to do his work. And so if that's what you're passionate about, if you're really wanting to do medicine and to practice and to help others, then go for it, and everything will just fall into place.
Hollywood, I see that you want to say something. Do you want to share some final thoughts?
I guess, yeah, I guess if any pre-med student is listening, I'm not sure. Yeah, my advice would be not to let any obstacles get in your way of what you want to do in life. Like, for example, I had my pre-med advisor who wasn't as supportive. You can't let people like that affect your dreams and goals, because in the end, you're the one who paves your own path, if that makes sense. We come from a background with not a lot of knowledge to resources, not a lot of financial support, and that in of itself is an obstacle. But I feel like your mind, your thoughts can be the biggest obstacle too, as in like, oh, I can't do this because other people are telling me that I can't do this, I don't have financial means, etc. But if you put your mind to it, you can do it. So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Awesome. Michael, do you want to share something?
I think it's important that no matter what part or stage in our life that we're still striving and working for those goals that we want. If our end goal is medical school or to be a doctor, then if I'm in high school, then I need to make sure I'm planning for that from that stage, because everything that we do throughout school is going to way we go in, even if it's not medicine. And if we want to make impactful change in other people's lives, then we have to be adapting constantly and growing. And so just like medicine, where we are continually growing, we have to also be that voice for our community and help them grow.
Thank you, Michael. And then lastly, Michaela.
I mean, I just wanted to say this is more of like a wrap up. I just really appreciate that people, students, and administrators took time to kind of hear us out, because like these are the conversations that lead to change. So like this is kind of the first step. So the fact that people did show up, we really all appreciate it. So that is all.
Deborah, would you like to say something?
I would like to say that it was really nice getting to know like the different perspectives, especially from the KU campus. I think it's important that we continue to grow our relationship, because the LMSA chapters, like we can do a lot more together. We can learn a lot more from each other. And so I just hope that if we can continue to have these conversations, or even have socials to get to know each other, because I think we can provide a lot for each other.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially in these during these COVID times. It's very important to keep together. So with that, I want to thank all of you, especially the panelists, for taking your time and being so willing and vulnerable to talk about your experiences. And thank you so much for all the people that join us today. And I am very excited to see what comes after these ideal conversations. So with that in mind, we're gonna post this video on our Facebook page. And if you guys have any questions, we're willing to get to you via email or social media. So thank you so much for joining us on these ideal conversations, and have a good day. Bye.